Creating generative AI apps doesn't mean you need to learn a lot of complicated APIs. In this video, we're going to create a game store catalog creator using Stable Diffusion, Amazon Bedrock, and Claude 3 Sonnet. We're going to use all these technologies together to create an application in the next 10 minutes. Let me show you a demo and show you how this works. So here is the video game catalog that I have just recently created. These are all Gen AI created, from the titles to the pictures, the description, the rating, even the price. To add a new item to the catalog, I'm gonna click Add Game, and then I'm given a prompt on the right-hand side. So I can either fill out everything by hand, or I can fill something out in the prompt and it will auto-generate everything we need. So this is a great way to create test data or dummy data, or just trying to play around with generative AI. So let's create a new prompt here. I'm going to ask it to create a new simulation game for a space shuttle. So I'll say create a simulation game for a space shuttle. And so right now it's going to contact our Claude 3 model and also Stable Diffusion and get us some pictures that we can use for this game. All right, great. You can see here that it gave us the Space Shuttle Odyssey title for the game. It gave us a description, a rating, a price, and I have 4 different pictures I can choose from. So I'm gonna go ahead and save one of these pictures to my local hard drive, and then right down here, I'm gonna put that name of that picture. So I'm gonna save it into my public folder inside my project where this code is living. Okay, and now I'm gonna type in the name, shuttle.jpg, and I'll go ahead and submit it. You can see here the new space shuttle game has been added and everything has been generated for me. So let's take a look at a diagram and see how this works. All right, so here is a diagram of what we're building today. The app is already created, so I'm just gonna show you some highlights of it, but let me show you the overall architecture of it. So here is the user, and the user is us at the keyboard. And we're gonna use AWS Amplify Gen 2 for all our different APIs. And also the infrastructure is code tool to create all this infrastructure that we're creating. You can also, when we're done, you can actually host it on our Amplify hosting. We're also using TailwindCSS, Vite, React Router. We're also using another CSS library that gives this nice retro look and feel to it. When you go in and you put that prompt in to add that game, it goes to AppSync. And this AppSync checks with Amazon Cognito to make sure that you're authenticated and that you can actually perform the action that you're wanting to do. And then there's 3 different types of things you can do. You can do a custom query to an AWS Lambda resolver, and this is where we can generate the game listing. So all that fake data for you, what that does is it goes to Amazon Bedrock, which then hits Claude 3 Sonnet. We also have this game model, and this game model talks to DynamoDB, and this holds all that game information, the name, the description, the price, the rating, that all goes to this DynamoDB. And then we have another custom query to create the images, and that's through this AWS Lambda resolver, call it generateImage, that goes to Amazon Bedrock, and then that uses Stable Diffusion to actually generate the images to bring back to the front end. So you can see here quite a few steps in all this to get it working, but you'll see through the code that a lot of this complexity is abstracted away inside Gen 2, which makes it much more simpler to work with. So let's jump into the code and we can take a look at some highlights and how you can put this together. So we have a few packages here that we have installed. We have AWS Amplify, we have AWS Amplify UI React, and the AWS SDK Client Bedrock Runtime, which is gonna be running on our Lambda functions. And this will all need to be installed. In addition, we'll be using AWS Amplify Gen 2, and so we'll use this npm create amplify at latest, and this will create some boilerplate code that we'll be using to create our data layer and our authorizations that we'll need for this app. We're gonna use npx ampex sandbox to test everything locally. What this does is it creates an ephemeral environment in our AWS account that we can start and stop at any time, and it makes it really easy to test. And that's what I'm doing with this demo today. At the end, if I wanted to push this production, I can connect it to the AWS console, and I'll put links below if you want to take that step next. One more thing, you need to make sure you have AWS credentials locally saved on your computer. You can do that when you set up your AWS CLI. You can also set up Identity Center. If you like to do that, I'll have some links in the description for that as well. So we have this open in VS Code, and you can see here we have a new Amplify folder, and we have this auth and data. And that was created when we ran that Amplify, npm create amplify at latest. Now you can see I added a few extra things. I had this new functions folder, and I have this generate game listing and also generate image. and I'll show you the code for that. But I want to highlight what's in the data folder and this resource folder that we see here. So this is the file that we define our data models. And these are also where we're going to define our custom queries that talk to those lambda functions that I showed you earlier in the diagram. So the first one I want to show you is this a.model. It's for this game model, and this will create the AppSync instance. It's also going to create this name, description, rating, price, and image fields. And it's going to create all the resolvers for this. So the create, read, update, delete, and list. So just with a few lines of code, it does this all for you. In this generate game listing, this is our first custom query. And what this is saying is that it's going to take in this description and it's going to return back a name, description, rating, and price. And it talks to a lambda function that I'm going to show you about in a moment, this generate game listing. And then we have the same thing similar for generate image. We have this query, we have arguments, it takes a prompt, and then it returns back this string here, which we're going to then use to generate this image. Now let's take a look at one of these lambda functions. So first we're going to look at this generate game listings. And if we look at the code here, and by the way, we will have a link for this in the description, it's going to talk to our Claude 3 Sonnet model. And essentially what we're doing is we're just defining exactly what we're sending to it and what we expect back. So we have a system prompt that we tell it that this is a video game listings and that we want to retrieve back these certain fields. And then we're using one of the Claude options here called tools. And what's really nice about this is we can define exactly what we want back. So our different response types, our input schema for our types, for our name, description, rating, and price. And we can define exactly what we want. We can also tell it that we want JSON back. And that's really important because we need to be able to parse the data when it comes back from the Claude 3 Sonnet model. And we can also say always use this response type. So always use this tool, this response type. And for this messages, we're basically saying that we're going to send over the arguments and it's going to return back the data we expect. And then we do a little bit of decoding and we send it all back to the user. For the generate image, this is using the stable diffusion. You can see here, I put the exact model that I want. I'm using stable image core, and I'm putting exactly the information that I want to come back, and then I'm decoding and sending it back. Now there's a few extra things we need to do. We have to define our backend inside our resource file here. We have to also update a few policies, which we'll go ahead and add in here as well. The last thing I want to show you real quick is the React code that we're using for all of this. I have a bunch of different use states. One thing you should pay attention to is I have this query here, generate game listings, which I take in this prompt. So this is how I query the backend from the front end to connect to that AppSync service that will connect to Bedrock and Claude. And then I have the same thing for generate images. In this case, I'm generating multiple different images, and then I am setting them into an array and then having the information available for the front end later on. This has been a lot of information, but this just shows the powerfulness of Amplify Gen 2 and using it with Bedrock and these large language models. Please, if you like, click some of the links in the description below and you can learn even more.